Heads of West African countries have resolved not to recognize any leader other than the Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum, who is being held hostage by members of his presidential guard who seized power last week. The leaders of the sub-region reached the resolution on Sunday after an extraordinary summit of the Authority of Heads of State and Government of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. The ECOWAS leaders also insisted that if constitutional government was not restored in Niger in the next 1 week, they will use all means necessary to effect change to status quo, including force. Kendi Amodu completes the report.
All right. Now, we expect to bring that report perhaps shortly, but we have in the studio Baba Yusuf, who is a strategist, policy analyst, and also group CEO of the Global Investment and Trade Company with us to talk about this. Thank you so much for joining us, Baba Yusuf, on this.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the developments in Niger, the ECOWAS, before that coup, as a matter of fact, the Nigerian president said, well, no more coups in the sub-region, that African leaders will no longer allow coups in the sub-region. And then this happened. And so ECOWAS is now, forced to now begin to meet and discuss and, what to do and all that. Now that they have said that they will not recognize the military junta in Niger, and they are given an ultimatum of 7 days within which the military leaders will, return to civilian government. Otherwise, there could be use of force. But analysts have argued that whether or not the ECOWAS will be able to do that. What did you make of this recent happenings?
Well, it's a sad reality of not just the West African sub-region of African continent, but the entire, it's an African issue, if we contextualize it within the continent of Africa. Another time we can talk about coups in even other sub-regions around the world. The question about the capacity or ability of ECOWAS to live true to its words with regards to the threats they have issued and the ultimatum they have given. I think the African Union also earlier gave about 15 days ultimatum or something like that. If we go back to history or antecedents of ECOWAS, we saw the interventions in 2017 when during the tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari, the intervention that saw the outstar of the former president of Gambia, when there was that stalemate. And that intervention played out in the sense that when the interventionists team were approaching Gambia, the former president was eased out, so to speak. Possibly the ECOWAS is trying to, use that playbook yet again. What remains to be seen is how it plays out, because we have also, the dynamics have changed from 2017 to 2023. We know we have state and non-state actors. It's a hotbed of non-state actors, particularly in that area. We have the Wagner Group, we have ISIS, ISIL, Boko Haram, and centuries of banditry in these regions. You have the incursion of the breakdown of security, law and order from Libya, which is bordering Niger, and you have Mali that is already facing those issues. So we will wait and see how that plays out practically, but living up to that threat, I think they will do, but how effective that will be is the question, especially when you see the Nigerian citizens also majorly, supporting this, the outcome of this.
Mr. Yusuf, before we even go to the Nigerians actually supporting the coup, we have the coupists actually asking Russia for help. And earlier we saw the leader of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin, hailing it as a good move. Isn't that, if they are seeking the help of the Russians and maybe the Wagner Group and the ECOWAS forces coming, isn't that going to be catastrophic for the country?
Stella, you are on point. Before I landed, I deliberately mentioned the non-state and state actors, and I listed Wagner Group there. What you see is, first of all, you step back and see this new emergence. Yesterday, I was looking at the entire African map, and I saw a trend, or I see a trend from Guinea-Conakry. Then you have Mali, you have Burkina Faso, and now you have Niger. And if you take it further, we already know that the Chadian regime is not actually a democratic setting. It's a quasi, military regime. And then you move further, you have a total meltdown in Sudan. So if you look at it, it's a belt of this, I call it the troubled belt of Sahel, from Guinea-Conakry up to Sudan, which is almost to the end of the Eastern Africa. Now, these non-state actors are there as opportunists. And the Nigerian military already mapped out their strategy. They might have anticipated this move by ECOWAS. So what did they do? They lean on the populist, trend of non-delivery of good dividends of democracy by the so-called democratic institutions and the socio-economic stress on the people to now come with this age-old mantra of coming to save the people, and then lean on the kind of the types of Wagner crew on the front end to say we are seeking for. But also let's not, for ECOWAS also, the strategies there should also consider the non-state actors, the unseen hand, the deep state that have penetrated that region, and we see their hands, even though they are unseen, even moving into the Nigerian security issue. So in mapping out their strategy to turn around the events in Niger, I don't think it's an operational thing. It has to be highly strategic in the interest of the populace of Niger.
Baba Yusuf, one thing I'm curious about is the seeming double standards here. We've seen this Mali took place, we've seen this coup took place in Mali, took place in Guinea, like you said, took place in Burkina Faso. We didn't see the ECOWAS move in the way it did. In fact, in Chad, when this coup happened, next thing we see is the Chadian military president appearing in civilian regalia, attending meetings of ECOWAS and the AU. So why the seeming double standards? Why haven't we seen ECOWAS move in the same manner in those other countries?
Well, you can call it a function of the strategy of ECOWAS or the timing, different strokes for different folks. We have a new president, a chairman of ECOWAS in the person of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. This may be his own approach to driving things. We had a different chairman of ECOWAS at that time. But indeed, ECOWAS is a state, and I think the chairman is first amongst equals. So to that extent, your question is in order. And that is why probably I call the erosion of respect for the democratic institution in Africa, especially in this context of West Africa, whereby you see this kind of posturing and body languages that even the coupists or the pushists do not really bother to take into consideration, because like you said, what happened in the case of Mali. But then in fairness to ECOWAS didn't just keep quiet. But at that time, ECOWAS rather leaned into rhetorics, and mantra to allow the matter to fizzle away. And now we have, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea basically, playing out their transitions. And most likely you will see these guys in uniform turning to, agbada or suits to become part of the ECOWAS, and also to be judgmental to other people maybe. Don't forget that even amongst ECOWAS, the ECOWAS states, you have people that came through the barrel of gun and are now promoting quote-unquote democracy.
Baba, so why is it that most of the African countries that were announcing the return of coups are francophone countries? Why is that so?
I think to my mind, there are three reasons, in my opinion. First of all, the fundamental issue is the failure of the leaders to provide good governance to their people. That, to my mind, is fundamental. Secondly,
but not to cut you short, but we have seen instances where the military come in and they don't do any better. So
well, you see, because the coups cannot be legitimized. We know that their intent is, for all sense of purpose, not in the interest of the people anyway. It's a special purpose vehicle, to come in and take power. But let's go back to your question. France, that is, most of these countries are former colonies of France, and we see the dissipation of the powers of France over these people, maybe because of their own model, even post-France. We've heard and we've seen the statistics of how they still have a choking hold on the state assets of these Francophone countries that makes it even difficult for these Francophone countries to move faster than they are moving. And the leaders that have come, either because they are puppets or they are not dogmatic, I mean, they are not progressive enough, have not been able to win themselves from this grip of the of France. And we've heard also, you know, and seen from data the seeming, you know, counter to even those leaders that want to actually bring those change through foisting this kind of coups to take back, you know, power from even leaders that actually want to win themselves, you know, off France or that kind of dictatorial or draconian hold, if you like. We saw videos, I saw videos trending just after the coup of the former president of Niger talking about winning themselves off the CFA and some measures to take to, you know, consolidate their independence and all that. And days later, this coup happened. Then the third factor is also you know, leaning to the first factor of lack of, you know, good governance, you know, where these non-state actors and the deep state of the West and the East trying to come in and assert themselves, you know, subliminally to continue plunging our natural resources. And how can they do that? Continually bringing these distortions in our democracy to continue, you know, creating this crisis and taking away this natural resources.
Do you see this snowballing into a full-fledged proxy war, sort of? Because now from the narratives that we are seeing, the Wagner group that you mentioned, which is Russia-linked, has hailed these coup plotters, right? And then on the other hand, you have the EU, you have the AU, you have the ECOWAS condemning this, right? So is this going to be a kind of a West versus Russia proxy war in Niger?
It's already happening. It's part of the emerging geopolitics, global and regional, Ayuba and Stella. You just go back, just turn your search light on Sudan and what is happening. We already know the unseen hands from what we are hearing is Russia and the United States. And look at what's happened to that entity. It's basically almost a proxy war as we speak. Wagner has been very clearly positioning, while the other side has been more strategic. But then the posturing and the positioning, we don't see, you know, progressively and sure-footedly for the interest of the people. Every day they are killing people. People are, you know, heading out. We don't see any consolidated effort by the United Nations or by African Union to go in there and quell this issue. But what you have are talk shops that are actually degenerating them more. And that is to tell you that the interests that are behind what we are seeing are bigger than the so-called interests on the table.
But we also see the citizens of Niger. We see them on the streets talking and saying that they do not even want any intervention by any international organization or country. They don't want, and they seem to be in support of the coup. And we've seen that happen in other African countries where the coupists came on. Why is that so?
The erosion of trust on the democratic institutions, not because the democratic institutions are not the way to go, but first of all, because of the style of the democracy that is adopted, that is a mismatch within the context of Africa. We have not been able to domesticate our democracy to be able to be impactful. And then secondly, the way and manner the leaders have come into the power and now forget, you know, all that they have promised the people, and then systemically and serially fail and betray the trust given on them. And that has resulted to this mistrust. The Africa Barometer, which is a network of...
No matter the level of mistrust, the military is not the way to go.
Sorry, Stella.
They should know that.
You see, desperate people do desperate things. That is to tell you the dire situation in Africa. People are so disillusioned by some of these democratic... I mean, let's go back. Before that, I will land. Africa Barometer is a non-partisan research network. And if you go to the Malian context and look at the Mali issue, Africa Barometer was able to come out with data that shows over 80% of Malians support the military, the intervention, while 40-something% said no, they don't support it. And the question is, it's question of being between the devil and the deep blue sea. People have campaigned that they want to deliver this and that they have not delivered, right? So, and then someone is coming to say, I'm going to offer you. This is the tragedy. This is the paradox of the tragedy of Africans.
So, would you say then that the Malian, not Malian now, the Nigerian people,
yes,
are probably not patient enough with the President Mohamed Bazoum, who is barely 2 years in office?
Yes, it still goes back to the erosion of trust. People are so, frustrated with this, serial failure of various democratic institutions or political class, let me say this, that they don't even have the patience to wait again. That is on one side. And the second side, like I said, the unseen hands of the deep state. That even if, like I gave the instance, we need still to verify that position, but indeed it is from a major, media platform in this world that interviewed the former president of Niger, the BBC. So it's possible also that the deep state, in this case France, has a hand in it to come and say, we wouldn't want this guy to come and disrupt what is happening and give support to these people to disrupt the system. But like I said again, we saw the support for the plotters in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, by the citizens. These citizens have the right of choice. We can sit here and pontificate about military is not ideal or not. The people that are in those countries are saying this is maybe a better option. So it's a sense of, it's a reflection of the desperation of a people that we have consistently failed.
Does it then make the job of ECOWAS to intervene in this difficult, the support on the streets?
It's a very sensitive and precarious situation. Interestingly, another dimension that I saw the president of Chad, Mohamed Idriss Déby, who suddenly, converted into Agbada, that is, leading a country under a quasi-dictatorship, going there to say he's trying to see what can be done. And let us note that ECOWAS actually didn't send him. He's going there as an Chadian initiative, as a neighbor. So it tells you the kind of situation ECOWAS is in. But in this particular regard, also let us flip the coin and say, does the Nigerian military have the capacity to face the ECOWAS interventionist troops? No, they don't have. So we will wait and see, because they have clearly called for the Wagner Group support. Now, how that will play out, whether the Wagner Group cell in the West African sub-region will have the capacity to face the ECOWAS forces, is what I don't think they can, because presently Wagner Group is highly stretched out. Their resources are in Sudan. They have a lot of activities within the Ukrainian and Russia war. So they are actually stretched out. So I don't see them coming in the way they should have come in if the resources are fully focal. But then again, we hope and pray that reason will prevail so that the bloodshed will not happen and innocent citizens will not yet again die. Also, so that we don't have the scenario that has happened in Sudan playing out in Niger. And that would be very unfortunate, because as a Nigerian, I know how impactful it will be, first of all, to Nigeria, which is basically more or less, part and parcel of Niger, part and parcel of Nigeria.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Baba Yusuf, strategist, policy analyst, and group CEO of the Global Investment and Trade Company. We appreciate you joining us on Daybreak.
Thank you very much for having me, Stella.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Now, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll take a look at stories on the front pages of our newspapers. Please join us again.